Folks, it's Paul Skenes time.
You are Locked On Pirates, your daily Pittsburgh Pirates podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And of course, welcome back to the Locked On Pirates podcast here on the Locked On Podcast Network, where it is your team, your Pittsburgh Pirates, every single day. My name is Ethan Smith. Follow me on Twitter, right there at MVP_Ethan or at Locked On Pirates for all of your news, analysis, opinions, and reactions to everything going on in the world of the Pittsburgh Pirates, because right now there is a lot going on with the Pittsburgh Pirates, folks. Paul David Skenes is officially a Pittsburgh Pirate. They will be selecting his contract and calling him up to debut against the Chicago Cubs this Saturday. I will be in attendance on Friday, and I, of course, will be there on Saturday. And as you can see, the beard is gone again. I said when Paul Skenes got called up that I was going to do this again. And folks, this is a big moment for the Pittsburgh Pirates. Now, I know what a lot of you are thinking already. The offense is sputtering. Skenes isn't coming up here to fix the offense. But for just a moment, let's be happy about this. Because, folks, I am 25. I know people in the Pirate scope that are much older than me. Sorry, guys, to throw out your age there. That have also said this exact same thing that I'm about to say right now. Paul Skenes is a prospect he is a generational guy. And he is a prospect unlike no other that we have seen called up to the Pittsburgh Pirates in the team's entire history. That is including, in my lifetime, Andrew McCutchen. That is including, in my lifetime, Garrett Cole. There are a lot of prospects that have been highly touted that have made their debuts in a Pittsburgh Pirates uniform. None bigger than Paul David Skenes. Paul Skenes, folks, from the moment he was drafted, has been a guy that immediately had expectations. He was the number one overall pick for a reason. He was that kind of player. He was that kind of guy coming out of Louisiana State University. Obviously, former Air Force Academy. But you saw what he did in college. And he was just, college hitters could not hit Paul Skenes. That's how good his stuff is. He pitched in the minor leagues a little bit last year. We remember a couple of starts in Bradenton, went up to Altoona, they shut him down. He had the very heavy workload at LSU. That was kind of expected. Coming into this year, there was a conversation happening about Paul Skenes being on this roster right away. I was a prime advocate of saying he did not need to be on the roster just yet because he'd never pitched on a 4-day or even 5-day rest schedule before, and it was something that he would have to get acclimated to. He pitched 7 starts in the minor leagues at AAA Indianapolis, folks, and he had a .99 ERA. A 0.99 ERA for Paul Skenes. That's insane. And when you break it down even further, folks, he was almost striking out 2 batters per inning at AAA Indianapolis in his time there. 45 strikeouts over 27 innings pitched. That is absolutely nuts. A 0.91 whip. You guys know all these things. His statistics down there have been absolutely nuts. So now you bring him up. And bringing him up creates a lot of different moving parts. It really does. And we're going to get through those throughout the entire episode when we talk about expectations, what it means for the starting rotation, why the timing of this, I believe, is perfect. But right now, we're just going to talk about the gravity of him being called up. Folks, this is not just a Pittsburgh Pirates thing. Major League Baseball will find a way to get this game on national television, or at least on MLB Network. Major League Baseball is treating this like a major deal. They're treating it like when Jackson Holliday debuted a few weeks ago. And you're talking about the number one pitching prospect in all of baseball. This is a guy that is going to come to Major League Baseball already ready. He's been ready since he was drafted last year. He could have came onto this roster last season and probably at least pitched a couple of starts and probably looked pretty good in doing so. Now, obviously, he would have gotten shut down just about as quickly as he did in the minor leagues, but he was a guy coming right out that could just pop right in this rotation. And that's something that the Pirates have never had, and it's something that a lot of teams have flat out just never had. And you look at the stuff that he's going to bring. He brings that elite fastball. He has that top velo number, which, of course, a lot of people are going to worry about Tommy John surgery, worry about it when it happens. He comes in with the splinker, a pitch that he's been using in the minor leagues quite a bit that he absolutely loves. He obviously has the slider as well. He has a pitch mix already that is suitable and ready for Major League Baseball. And at this point, I didn't see any more reason why he needed to be in the minor leagues. Now, you guys have heard me on this show. You've heard Gary Morgan on this show mention that he is going to be on some sort of pitch or innings count the entire year. They've done it with Jared Jones already. They're going to do it with Paul Skenes too, because they are going to try to use these guys as long as they can until that dreaded two-letter word, TJ, or two-letter word, two letters, TJ, eventually come down the line. And there's multiple modes of thinking on that. But Paul Skenes, as long as he is healthy, he's going to give you 5 to 6 strong innings more often than not. Now, here is the other thing, as far as expectations are concerned, especially for Saturday. The Chicago Cubs are going to come out and swing and be very aggressive against Paul Skenes on Saturday because they know that Paul Skenes is going to want to fill the zone. They know that Paul Skenes is going to want to have an electric MLB debut, and they know that that's how you attack Paul Skenes. We saw that a little bit in his last start on Sunday where Aurelvis Martinez and the Buffalo Bison were kind of going after him earlier in counts and not letting him get into his groove that he usually gets into. The Cubs are going to do that exact same thing. So when you're tempering expectations here with Skenes, yes, everything I just said is and can be true. That does not mean that he's going to come up here and throw 8 shutout innings on Saturday. He can do that. Don't get me wrong. He quite possibly could. But the expectations now have heightened even more because of Jared Jones. Jared Jones has set the bar even higher for Paul Skenes now because of what he's been able to do throughout his first month and a half of his professional career at Major League Baseball. Skenes already has the heightened expectations. Every little tiny sliver of a thing that he does is going to get broken down to a science almost with how he performs. Everything that Paul Skenes does from this point forward, beginning on Saturday throughout his career, especially this season, is going to be either criticized or praised. That's just how it's going to be. And he is that kind of prospect where I don't see a middle ground with that kind of thing. Now, I will offer the middle ground. Other podcasters and media folks will hopefully offer the middle ground to you and not blow their gasket when he gives up 5 runs in a game eventually. But again, 12 starts in the minor leagues, folks, 34 innings pitched, a 1.85 ERA, and 55 strikeouts overall in those 34 innings. There was no need for Paul Skenes to be in AAA anymore. There just was not. And this creates now a fun dynamic with this starting rotation because the Pirates now, if they keep Quinn Priester in the rotation. We obviously don't have roster moves or their plans on what they're going to do with the rotation just yet, but I'm going to hint at that second segment. They are going to have 3 of the 5 youngest pitchers in Major League Baseball in their rotation as of right now in Paul Skenes, Quinn Priester, and Jared Jones. That is a very good thing to have because Priester has shown signs of life this year. Yeah, he's teetered off a little bit and he's had his moments, but he's shown signs of life of being that potential first round pick and top guy that Jim Callis and a lot of MLB prospect analysts were touting him to be. Paul Skenes, folks, there is no analyst out there that will really say anything different about Paul Skenes except the fact that he is absolutely generational. And the sky is the limit for Paul Skenes, truthfully. I mean, you are talking about a guy that inserting him into this, if he would have started from day one and Jared Jones in hindsight, this is all hindsight, by the way, but if Jared Jones was doing exactly what he was doing and Paul Skenes would have debuted day one, the Pirates would have 2 Rookie of the Year candidates on their roster. And they even still might. Paul Skenes is that kind of guy where if he comes out and he absolutely dominates through the first couple of his starts, he'll be in the conversation just by namesake alone. And this is major news again, folks. You can tell that the energy on this show has changed. We're not talking about the offense right now. We'll talk about that on tomorrow's show and all these other shows that we're going to be doing over the next couple days. This is about Paul Skenes and the fact that his debut, again, is the biggest debut by a prospect in Pittsburgh Pirates history. This is a major, major moment. And I even talked about it on the show yesterday about righting a wrong going into a stretch against the Cubs and the Brewers. I said it last season that I wanted them to bring up Henry Davis and Endy Rodriguez to help during that stretch when the team was sputtering. Well, now the team's sputtering a little bit, and they bring up their best guy in the system, in Paul Skenes, ahead of the biggest stretch of the season so far. And that is major news because that is going to more than help this team in the stretch because they'll likely start twice over this stretch of the next 10 games. And folks, if Paul Skenes can do anything of the sort that he was doing in the minors, look out because this rotation is going to be scary. Speaking of that rotation for the Pittsburgh Pirates, what does this all mean for the starting rotation? Because, you know, there were already 5 guys there. And Paul Skenes is coming in. And he's going to start. He's going to be in the rotation. So what does this mean for the rotation? And who's going to be the casualty? Who's going to get booted out of the rotation? We'll talk about that in just a moment, folks. But before we do, let's hear from DoorDash and Monopoly Go. Today's episode of Locked On Pirates is brought to you by DoorDash. Order on DoorDash today using code LOCKEDONMLB. And folks, Mother's Day is right around the corner and moms are a gift. So give her the best this Mother's Day and get gifts as thoughtful as she is with DoorDash. Select from hundreds of expertly crafted bouquets to the best of tech to self-care essentials and more delivered right to her door. If she has a sweet tooth or she's a tech enthusiast, it doesn't really matter because DoorDash is going to have all of those things ready for you on Mother's Day this weekend. So get all your Mother's Day gifts all in one place and get 50% off your next order up to $15 when you spend $15 or more on your next flour, convenience, grocery, or retail order now with code LOCKEDONMLB. That's LOCKEDONMLB. Order using DoorDash today. Terms apply. Today's episode of Locked On Pirates is also brought to you by Monopoly Go. Make sure you download Monopoly Go free on the App Store and Google Play. And folks, Monopoly Go's here for you because if you're ever at the halfway point and you think you're losing, well, folks, in Monopoly Go, you can always come back. In Monopoly Go, you can team up with friends for time tournaments where you work together to build up each other's boards. And the more you win together, the more awesome prizes you unlock. And there's so much more to get, like unique stickers that you could trade with friends, to complete albums for big prizes, cool new playing pieces to travel boards with, and hilarious emojis for taunting friends when you smash their buildings or heist their vaults. And there's always new timed events that help you win big, like massive multipliers for everything you win or rent frenzies. There's always something fun to discover in Monopoly Go, so get off the bench and go download it now free on Google Play or the App Store. Game on. And folks, thank you to Monopoly Go and, of course, our wonderful people over at DoorDash for always sponsoring this show. And also check out Locked On Sports Today here on YouTube or on Amazon Fire TV, where you can get 24/7 analysis from all the local experts of Locked On here on the Locked On Podcast Network. And of course, we're talking Paul Skenes today. Who else would we be talking about? Really, who else would we be talking about today other than Paul Skenes? And one of the big question marks that I had before this news became official, and it's official now, so we have to talk about it, was who was going to exit the rotation when Paul Skenes was eventually coming up. And I think that that's a very important talking point to have, because we don't really know. We haven't heard who the roster move is going to be yet. Obviously, that'll probably come out in the coming days. We'll probably see that here pretty soon. And obviously, you have the guys in the rotation that aren't going to exit the rotation. Mitch Keller just got the big extension. He's going to stay. Jared Jones is going to stay as well. He's had a phenomenal beginning to the year. He's a Rookie of the Year candidate alongside Shoto Imanaga and Yoshinobu Yamamoto. He will stay. Martin Perez was one of their big offseason signings, so of course he will stay. So then that leaves Quinn Priester and Bailey Falter. And what I find interesting about talking about this is it does get a little difficult when you're considering who goes, because Priester, for all the issues that he has had, is still a former first-round pick. And he's a guy that has shown flashes of improvement this year. He showed those in AAA a little bit, and then has shown them a little bit as well coming up for Marco Gonzalez, who, of course, was on the IL after his elbow injury. And I don't think that you really want to send a guy like Quinn Priester back down just yet, or send him to the bullpen, because why do that when you can give him a couple more starts and see if you can get some of those good starts that we've seen from Quinn Priester so far this year and even last year. So then that leaves Bailey Falter. Bailey Falter has also had quite the season so far. Of course, you remove that first start that he had against the Miami Marlins, and his numbers are actually quite good. Obviously gave up 5 runs on opening day to the Miami Marlins, including a grand slam from Jazz Chisholm. Since then, he's been okay. Now, obviously, he's had his moments as well. He's kind of been that guy that everybody just kind of hates by proxy because they wanted Paul Skenes in the rotation right away. But it's not as simple as a lot of people think it is, folks, to just take one of those two guys out of the rotation and insert Paul Skenes. And obviously, they're going to have to do something because, as I mentioned on the show, I believe earlier this week or last week, they are not going to run a 6-man rotation. It is just not going to happen. It is not something that the Pirates have any interest in whatsoever. So you're likely going to see somebody move to the bullpen and then a bullpen arm gets sent down. Now, if you head over to Steel City Pirates, Gary Morgan did a great breakdown of this in his piece that he had last night, asking who goes for Skenes, mentioning, of course, Marco Gonzalez or Ryan Barucki moving to the 60-day IL. You could simply cut someone loose, Gary says. And he does mention Roansy Contreras. Now, Roansy is an interesting topic here because obviously Roansy in 2022 was a guy that we expected to be in this rotation for the next half decade. Then, of course, comes last year where he had those multiple struggles. He had the velocity dip a lot. He had to get sent down all the way to single A, to the point where he was basically shut down for the season, trying to just get his confidence back and trying to get his mechanics back. This year, they say, okay, we're going to have him as a bullpen arm. But much like Luis Ortiz, I don't think that they've been using him correctly in the bullpen because they've been bringing those guys in when there's runners in scoring position or runners on base. And from a starter's mentality, from moving to the starting rotation to the bullpen, you want those guys to go into the game with nobody on and nobody out, much like they would when they were starters. They haven't done that with a guy like Rowanzi or a guy like Ortiz just yet. And the only big caveat to all of that as well with Rowanzi Contreras is you would have to DFA him. And folks, I will tell you, Gary told you in that piece as well, he will get picked up by somebody. He was a former top prospect. I don't ever think he was in the top 100, but he was touted highly by a lot of prospect analysts who said Rowanzi could be a valuable starter in this league. Now, valuable starter could mean top end starter. It could mean back of the rotation starter. Right now, though, the Pirates don't really have a spot for him, and they've already shown a willingness to put him in the bullpen. So this is where the dominoes continue to fall. And Bailey Falter, who I also mentioned, doesn't have options either. So if you were to DFA Bailey Falter, you lose him too. And knock on wood, the only big injury that the Pirates have had in their rotation so far this year is Marco Gonzalez. And I've praised them for what they did in the offseason, where they didn't go out and get those marquee pitching signings. They did get Martin Perez, which I consider a marquee pitching signing because he's been great so far. But you like to have the depth that they've created. You have Domingo Germán, who still needs to prove it off the field and on the field. You have Eric Lauer. You're going to eventually have a guy in Mike Burrows who's going to come back from injury eventually. So why not try to keep all of this just in the case that injuries could happen? I think that's a big thing here. And also, how well does Bailey Falter really work in the bullpen? It's something that he's lightly done in his career, but I don't think that his skill set exactly fits a bullpen arm. I think that he's one of those guys that, kind of like we saw with Patrick Sandoval on Tuesday, he has to get in that groove, and you can't really get in a groove when you're in the bullpen, even if it's in a long relief role, because you're just not out there long enough. But this is a problem that the Pirates are going to have to fix by Saturday. They're going to have a roster move. And there's a lot of different options that you have here. I mean, you could give Priester one or two more starts and then get him out of there. You could theoretically just move Falter to the bullpen and DFA Contreras, or again, put Marco Gonzalez or Ryan Barucki on the 60-day IL. I think Marco Gonzalez would probably be the more likely candidate for that. And they'll open the spot for Skenes no matter what. But folks, this is something I wanted to say before this even became official. And it's something that I did say, is it's not that easy to get him up here. And I'll even tail and go on a little bit of a tangent for a second before we go to the final segment. Nick Gonzalez, for instance, has had a great start to the year. He really has in AAA. Getting him up here just to see would be great. But who do you send down? Who are you sending down in that case? You're not sending down O'Neal Cruz, Alika Williams, or Triolo. So who do you send down? Edward Olivares? He's really the only candidate. So it's not that easy. And these are decisions that good baseball teams have to make. They are having to make a pretty difficult decision to call up the number one overall pitching prospect in all of baseball. They are going to have to go out of their way and take somebody out of the rotation when this rotation has actually been one of the better ones in baseball to begin the season. So Skenes was not in immediate need. And getting him here is going to be a little complicated. There's going to have to be some roster gymnastics that are going to have to come into play here for Ben Cherington to get him on the roster and select his contract to pitch Saturday. And we'll see what those are. When they are here, we will talk about it. But it was never going to be an easy thing to get Skenes up here, even with how talented he is. Now, was it an immediate need for him to be up here? Not exactly, but the timing of it is perfect. We're going to talk about why the timing of Paul Skenes arriving this Saturday is perfect. But before we do, folks, we're going to hear from Prize Picks. Today's episode of Locked On Pirates is also brought to you by Prize Picks. Download the Prize Picks app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB for a first deposit match up to $100 because, folks, baseball is in full swing and you don't want to miss your chance to add your favorite players from the diamond in your Prize Picks entries because Prize Picks is America's #1 fantasy sports app with more than 3 million members, and it's so simple. It is so easy to win money on Prize Picks because all you're doing is picking more or less on 2 or more player stats and watching your winnings roll in. And it's not just baseball where it's strikeouts, RBIs, first inning runs, all that kind of stuff. But you can get on the NBA playoff action as well and win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks today. So download the Prize Picks app and use code LOCKEDONMLB for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, download the app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB for a first deposit match up to $100. All you have to do at Prize Picks is pick more, pick less. It's that easy with Prize Picks. And thank you to Prize Picks for being a wonderful sponsor of this podcast. And thank you to all the sponsors, of course, of the Locked On Pirates podcast. And it is the final segment of today's episode on May 9th here, Thursday, May 9th. Obviously, the big news, Paul Skenes getting his contract selected, debuting Saturday against the Chicago Cubs. And if you watched yesterday's live episode just before the game against the Los Angeles Angels, obviously the Pirates lose that series to the Angels of Anaheim, losing 5-4 yesterday. I mentioned something about this stretch that they were going into where they'll play the Chicago Cubs this weekend, the Milwaukee Brewers to begin next week, and then at Wrigley Field to end next week. 10 straight games against the NL Central. And you heard me lightly mention it earlier on the show that last year they can right a wrong from last year. We remember last year pretty vividly when this team was still in contention for the most part. They went into that stretch and didn't call up Henry Davis or Endy Rodriguez, 2 guys that a lot of people expected them to call up at the time. It seemed like those guys were ready. They were still fielding Austin Hedges. They lose 10 games in a row. Now, I also spoke on yesterday's show about why things are a little bit different going into this one, obviously with the introduction of O'Neal Cruz to this time, where he wasn't here last year. Obviously, Ke'Bryan Hayes is a much different player and was a little bit injured at the time last year. And the pitching staff is a lot better at this time, at this juncture, than it was going into that stretch last year, because we obviously remember Vince Velasquez getting hurt, and really the only 2 strong pitchers they had were Mitch Keller and Johan Oviedo. Of course, Jose Quintana was still there as well. Now, you call up Paul Skenes, which in all likelihood, folks, means that 8 out of these 10 games against the Chicago Cubs and the Milwaukee Brewers, the 2 teams atop of the NL Central right now, in 8 of those 10 games, you will likely be getting Paul Skenes twice, Jared Jones twice, Martin Perez twice, and Mitch Keller twice. So only 2 times out of those 10 games are you not getting one of those guys on the mound in all likelihood. And even in the other 2, you're getting probably Priester or Falter. Folks, that is a very good problem to have. That is a very good thing, because almost in all of these matchups, I think you will look at the starting pitching matchup and say the Pirates win that, at least from a pitching standpoint. Now, obviously, the offense is still a problem, and they still need to score runs to win these games. But look at the Brewers and the Cubs for a second. Yeah, you have Justin Steele and Shoto Imanaga. Then you have Freddie Peralta. After that, folks, I mean, you can make an argument that the Pirates right now have the best starting rotation from 1 to 5 in the division. And I don't think it's particularly close. And then you insert Paul Skenes into that. And I think that just doesn't even make it a question that this team has the best rotation in the division 1 to 5. Because you're going to have, again, Keller, Perez, Jones, Skenes. Now, something I do want to speak about, especially when it comes to this, is yes, I know that Jones and Skenes are going back-to-back Friday, Saturday. That is phenomenal. I cannot wait to see it in person. I don't think it's a good idea in the long run to have both of those guys go back-to-back. I would like to see a guy like Martin Perez kind of get thrown in there in the middle just to give teams a different look, because Skenes and Jones are obviously similar pitchers in terms of repertoire and just how they handle themselves on the mound and the skill sets that they bring. Martin Perez is like the complete opposite. So I would like to see that come into play, where you maybe see Mitch Keller, Jones, Perez, Skenes. I think would be a good kind of rotation of those guys so that you're kind of keeping teams off balance, especially in series. But the timing of this is perfect, because not only is the team sputtering and going into the biggest stretch of the season so far, in a stretch that they are all too familiar with from last year, but now you've called up your number one prospect to bolster a rotation that was already a very good rotation. And you've made it a lot more rational to say that they could go into this stretch and go in there and come out with a winning record. Now, again, they're going to have to score runs to do so, and Paul Skenes helps the rotation even more than the rotation was already helping itself. But this could be the kind of thing that strings some momentum together for the entire team, because a guy of this magnitude arriving on the MLB roster is going to become contagious to everyone, not just the pitching staff, not just the coaching staff, not just the offense. It is going to be contagious from top to bottom in terms of energy, in terms of momentum, in terms of every important thing that you think about when it comes to winning baseball games. And winning baseball games is what the Pirates said they wanted to do in 2024. And this is a move that dictates that rational thinking. This is a move that showcases we want to win. We know the rotation is already strong, but we're going to make it stronger. This is almost like a trade deadline acquisition in May, folks, with Paul Skenes coming up. The timing could not be more perfect, and this weekend is going to be electric. We're going to obviously be talking Skenes a lot more over the next day or so, and probably even on Sunday or Monday. And folks, this is a great time to be a Pirates fan. Yes, I know the team is sputtering a little bit right now, but this is a major time to be a Pirates fan. This is great for this team, and Saturday is going to be electric. If you could find a way to be there, be there. Folks, thank you so much for tuning in to the Locked On Pirates podcast here on the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team, your Pittsburgh Pirates every day. My name is Ethan Smith. Follow me on Twitter right there at MVP_Ethan or at Locked On Pirates for all of your news, analysis, opinions, and reactions to everything going on in the world of the Pittsburgh Pirates. Find my writing work over at Steel City Pirates. You can find this show on YouTube. Hit that subscribe and like button, or you can find it on all of your audio platforms, free and available to you every Monday through Friday. And if extra episodes come out, folks, have a wonderful rest of your Thursday. We may even have another episode later, but we'll see. We'll be all over the place this week on your feeds. But until then, folks, I'll see you on the flip side.